Chapter 7. I'm sorry, sir. The virus isn't quite as deadly as we'd hoped. Fear billowed around the demon who cowered before Samael and Damon, and his eyes stayed glued to the ground, as if he was afraid even looking in their eyes would mean instant death. And why is that? Damon asked. He'd wanted the virus to be a force, to run through the population at will so that no one felt safe. But now this man was telling him otherwise. I'm not sure, sir. The scientists have said that it might be that some people already had immunity to part of the strain they used to modify it. Evidently, they had to pull from old viruses to make something that would work. And it is still working, he added quickly, as if to soften the blow. The elderly are hit especially hard, as well as anyone with immune disorders. It just isn't affecting the young and healthy in quite the same way. I see. Part of Damon wanted to rip the demon to shreds right then. He did not like being disappointed, but perhaps there was a way to play up what they could. You say the elderly are affected? Yes, sir. The demon finally lifted his eyes, as if sensing the change in Damon's demeanor. And humans love their elders, correct? Damon stroked his chin as he ran through scenarios in his mind. Most do, yes. So most would do anything to try and save them? Pieces were falling into place for Damon. If the deaths alone didn't break them, maybe he could find another way. I suppose so. The demon glanced to Samael as if looking for a clue as to what Damon was thinking. What would inconvenience them to the point that they'd be willing to do anything to get back to, quote, normal? Damon flicked his bony fingers in the gesture of quotation marks that he had seen the humans do time and again. Besides the lockdowns, most places are shutting down businesses to try and stop the disease. Not all places, though, Damon said quickly. Make sure they leave the right places open. Abortion clinics, bars, drug shops, anything that appeals to the base nature of humans. Those must be allowed to continue. Of course, sir, the demon said, bowing again. Now, what else can we do to make life unbearable for most? If we can't make the disease worse, can we at least make the cure unbearable? At least until I step in with the real cure. The demon cocked his head, as if thinking back through the years. In 1918, when what they called the Spanish flu hit, doctors required people to quarantine and wear masks. The people agreed for a time, but eventually they revolted. Is that something along what you are thinking, sir? Possibly. Damon tapped his fingers on the edge of his throne. But we don't want any revolts. How long might we have before a revolt might occur? It was over a year in 1918, sir. A year. That would give us long enough to come up with a cure, correct? He probably wouldn't even need the whole year, especially as some of the humans were still suffering due to the rapture. The demon paled. From what I understand, no cure has ever been created so quickly. They might be fearful of it. Then we must convince them not to be afraid, or find ways to force them to accept it. Go, tell the others to spread the word that not only should lockdowns continue, but masks should be worn. Lay the seeds for a cure. It's time the world began to learn the name Damon Katurix. This can't be happening, Brian growled from his desk. Raven stopped her workout and glanced over at Jason, who was scrawling boxing combos on the portable whiteboard they kept at the front of the gym. She'd come in a little early to work out, so it was just the three of them in the room at the moment. But Brian's anger radiated out in waves and seemed to fill the entire space. Even before she asked, Raven knew what he held in his hand. "What is it, Brian?" "A cease and desist order? Evidently the governor, in an effort to flatten the curve," he said in a mocking voice, "is forcing all non-essential businesses to shut down for 2 weeks. Jason's eyes caught hers as they approached Brian's desk. They'd both felt this was coming, but actually having it happen was another matter. "Is that legal? Can he even do that?" Anger colored Brian's voice and sent a chill down Raven's spine. She had never seen him this angry, not even when he'd had to replace the front of the building. "Doesn't the Constitution grant life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? How is forcing me to close my business not stealing my liberty and pursuit of happiness?" Raven shook her head. "I don't know, but you're right about the Constitution. Evidently he's claiming some emergency powers that enable him to make some of these rules, closing schools, businesses. I don't know how it can be legal, but I can ask around." Brian threw down the letter and dropped his head in his hands. Raven knew he wasn't mad at them, but at the situation. She hadn't been a member of the gym long, but she'd grown close to both Brian and Jason since joining, and she'd heard Brian's story. This gym was his baby. A former police officer, he'd always had a passion for kickboxing and karate. When he'd saved up enough money that he could afford equipment, he'd retired from the force and opened the gym. It had started in his garage at first, but soon he'd garnered enough clients that he'd been able to rent an old warehouse. It was large and dusty half the time, but it was like his second home. Even his wife had joined in, teaching classes in the afternoon. "This is ridiculous," he said, glancing up from the paper. "How can liquor and pot shops be deemed essential, but gyms not? Don't they understand how important exercise is to health?" Raven shook her head again, but deep down, she thought she knew the answer. It was because liquor and pot shops paid a hefty fee to the government, while gyms and other small businesses didn't. Shutting liquor stores and pot shops down would drain the government's money quickly. But shutting down smaller businesses, like Brian's, even for a short time, would put people out of work. Since the working people paid taxes and the taxes funded government, Raven still didn't understand how they could keep them closed for long. What would the government do without all their tax dollars? Jason ran a hand across his chin. "It's only 2 weeks, right? Can we make it the 2 weeks?" Brian sighed and scratched at the side of his face before meeting Jason's eyes. "If it's only 2 weeks, yes. But if it goes longer than that," he shook his head, "I don't know how I can keep paying you." Raven felt like an awkward third wheel in the conversation, but she also knew she couldn't stay silent. "Don't worry, Brian. We'll figure something out." She had no idea what, but she wasn't going to let the state destroy the 2 people she had grown closest to in the last few months. There had to be something they could do.